The TikTok kids have been giving high reps, high volume training a bad reputation. Just do 2 sets to failure or never do more than 10 reps because it causes too much calcium ion related fatigue. This is complete bullshit because other approaches have worked excellent for a century. So while the wheels suddenly shifting, it might be that they don't want to work hard. Doing 20 reps in a squat is difficult. It's gonna make your legs burn and your lungs work. Or it might be that they think you always have to train to failure. So suddenly doing 5 sets of 8 is worse than doing 2 sets of failure consisting of 12 reps and 10 reps, despite the 5 sets of 8 almost being double the volume and not to failure and therefore causing less fatigue, but most likely more stimulus. Or maybe they just don't like the gym as much as you and I do. And being able to say that doing less is more becomes a convenient excuse for them. In today's video, I'll give you my best tips for incorporating high volume, high reps training and why you should be combining it with low volume, low reps training for the most effective training. Doing high rep sets are straight up uncomfortable, especially when doing them for the legs. They will provide you with something that low reps can never give you. They require a certain mentality to get through when you're doing sets of 20 in the squats and you want to stop after 10 reps because you feel your lungs burning and your legs are set on fire. It takes time to get the mentality and build the mentality to push through this. So the first part of getting good at high reps is actually just getting comfortable with it. And you do that by doing it more and more. Doesn't necessarily have to be heavy. You might want to just use 50% or 40% of your 1 rep max because you will likely be limited by other factors than your actual strength in the beginning, and you will want to stop before or way before you have hit your actual RPE 10. But over time, as you practice more and more, you learn that this soreness and this burn is not a reason to stop. It is normal that it comes and you have to push through it. Over time, it will likely become less and less. So therefore, you have to practice them over and over again, high reps, to really push through this. They build a mentality that low reps will never build you, though low reps are obviously harder in its own way and in a different way. But I believe that if you can push yourself to failure and actually learn to get to an actual RPE 10 in a set of 20 squats, where the bar is actually moving extremely slow and you couldn't do another rep, even if you had to for the sake of your life, then you're going to be at a place where sets of 5 and 10 and 3 and so on are a walk in the park and are something you can easily go through. High volume, which is set time reps, means more total workload, and it's gonna be equivalent to more muscle mass. We can just look at farmers who are working manual labor back in the days for hours every day. I think Doc Hepburn is one of the people who did that, or maybe it was Doc Young. But anyways, these guys built huge erectors, arms, etc., and were extremely strong despite never doing what people these days would consider failure training, which are said to be what you need to get to failure in terms of growing muscle, where you have to get in the last 5 reps closest to failure, and apart from that, it is not stimulating in terms of muscle growth. That is complete bullshit because these farmers never do something where they are within 5 reps from failure, or it's probably very rare. So just the total amount of work that you're doing is always gonna add up. So doing 5 sets of 8 instead of 12 and instead of 10 is probably going to lead to better gains. Sure, it's going to take more time being in the gym, but it's not fluff work, even if it's only the last set that is a failure, or even if the last set is only RP8. You're doing so much more work, double amount of work, and you can probably go again way earlier because you're not going all the way to failure. So even doing something such as 10 by 10 reps are going to be beneficial for you and lead to more total muscle mass, even if it's only the last set that is taken to failure. All the other 9 sets are still going to contribute to adding a total amount of workload and building up muscle mass. As you can likely imagine, high reps, high volume training are more general training. It carries over to what you are going to be doing out in the real world. Because when have you ever done something that you can only do one time in the real world? Probably very rarely, if ever at all, outside of your training. So doing these high rep sets and stuff will prepare you for what is going to happen in the real world. Now, when it comes to building up the mass from all of this high volume training, you can't just go and do walking on a flat surface for 1 or 2 hours and expect to build up muscle in your legs. There obviously need to be a certain amount of intensity where you're actually challenging yourself. So you might, if you want to do that, you might need to go rocking or do something else. So you can't just go and walk, unfortunately. Now, one of the things that really revolutionized the importance of high volume work for me in terms of building work capacity, etc., was Westside Barbell. When I read that book, in which they're most known for their max effort method and dynamic effort method, but some of the things they do in the repetition effort method is absolutely bonkers. They would use something like 40-pound dumbbells and just do a set with constant tension that lasts for 5 minutes, where they go down slowly and go up slowly with something like a tempo of 4 seconds down, 4 seconds up, and they keep going for such a long time, for 5 minutes in a row with 40-pound dumbbells, which is absolutely wild. I think one of the other people they mention in there is the weightlifter Alexeyev from either Russia or the Soviet Union, and he would do like 1,000 leg raises per day, which again sounds absurd. But really, to me, this sounds very logical, because if all they did was all the low rep things, they would end up jacked. Because when you're doing low reps, low volume, you don't get any blood to your joint and things like that. You're simply not doing enough volume for that to happen. So if you can do these extremely high rep things, which is basically like active recovery at this point, because doing so high volume means that the intensity is too low to really cause any excessive fatigue. It almost becomes like walking, which again adds blood flow, and in that way are beneficial in terms of recovery, which is why it is called active recovery. I personally use a lot of the things they say in the Westside Barbell, and one of the things I began introducing is using bands for my warm-up, because with bands they become harder as you stretch them, which means that in your contracted position, so if you're doing bicep curls, they're gonna be hardest when the biceps is contracted all the way, which means that you get the occlusion effect where a lot of blood flow into the muscle. And it's a great way to warm up, but it's also a great way to use for workouts in between your normal trainings where you are focusing more on recovery, using a band that is extremely light and doing something such as 3 sets of 50 reps with a really light band, and that is going to aid more towards recovery. So the next day when you go in and hit your bench presses or something else requiring your biceps or triceps or whatever it is going to be, you're actually going to be performing better despite doing that high volume the day before. And what it does also with the bands is that it adds blood into your tendons and ligaments as well, which is usually hard because of the limited blood supply, but it helps with that and keeps them healthy and resilient. The increased work capacity that you get from doing high volume training mainly has 2 benefits. faster recovery, and better performance in competitions or later in your training block. With faster recovery, one of the main reasons is that you get an increased capillarization, which means that you have more blood running out to your muscles because you get more blood waste, similar to when you're doing cardio. You get the same here when you're doing a high amount of work because your bloods are signaling that in order for them to keep on working, they need more blood. So what does your body do? It adapts and adds ways for your body to get more blood out there, or for your heart, to pump more blood out to specific parts of your body that you're using. Another thing is that it builds up resilience in your tendons and ligaments so that you are avoiding micro tears. When you are doing a high amount of work, you can actually get some blood or a lot of blood relatively to low amount of work into your tendons and ligaments. And when skipping out of that, you will often hear people complaining that they feel locked up and such if you're only doing sets of like 1 to 5, a lot of powerlifting things, which is why including high rep stuff is brilliant, because if you're never doing that, you don't get blood flow to your muscles. And the way we recover is by getting new blood that flushes out the old one. So never doing any high rep stuff and active recovery, etc., is a good way to ensure that you are gonna feel restricted in your body and take longer to recover in the long run. So one of the things I've talked about in previous videos are banded work. And again, I'll quickly summarize why this is so important and beneficial in terms of getting that, like the maximum amount of blood that we can possibly get into our ligaments and tendons in our joints. Because bands get harder when they are lengthened, it will make the exercise hardest when our muscles are contracted. So let's say the elbow, the triceps here that we're working when doing elbow extensions. Then if we're doing the just with a band, it will get harder in the extended position, which is where there is like a compression going on. And that will in turn mean that when we end that compression, a lot of blood begins to flow in to the muscles around the elbow. And especially if we're doing limited ranges of motion and a short range exercise, then it will in turn mean that we don't get a lot of muscle stress, but we get more stress on the ligaments and tendons and maximize the amount of blood that we can push into that. You're also going to see an increase in mitochondria. Not to turn this into a whole biology class, but just to refresh. Mitochondria is the main energy source, what creates energy in your body. So when you have more mitochondria, it means that you just become more efficient at creating energy, even within just a set or training. And that way you are recovering faster, not just between workouts, but also between sets. Lastly, things like backward sled don't have an eccentric component. So when you're walking backwards, usually the most damaging thing, and especially central nervous system taxing thing, is the eccentric when our muscles are being stretched, because this is tearing the muscle fibers apart. But when you leave that out, you can actually target the muscles instead, which in turn gives you less and less fatigue while training what we actually want. We want our muscles to be stronger always, of course, but we want to avoid fatigue. Fatigue is never good. Stress and stimulus is, but we want to keep the stimulus to fatigue ratio favorable. We do that by having a high stimulus with as minimal amount of fatigue. So by doing so, by having no eccentric portion, you can accomplish that. High reps are also essential for injury prevention. In your warm-up, you want to do high reps rather than low reps, because if you're just doing a few reps only and you're not warmed up, you're not really being warmed up as you approach failure. Not that you should do that in your warm-up, but you're not really getting warmed up anyways from doing like 5 or 10 reps. Instead, do something where you do 25, 50 reps, and you'll actually feel that when it starts to become a little bit difficult, it doesn't matter, because just from doing the first 20, 30 reps, you're already warmed up. And apart from that, doing these things in a warm-up can also just act as increasing your overall work capacity. I've felt since adding a lot of leg curls and good mornings in my warm-up that in things like head-up curls and good mornings and things like that, it's become a lot easier for me to recover from these types of heavier workouts, because I have a better ability to generate force for a longer period of time, simply because of the little bit amount of more work that I'm doing every single day, just from these 50 to 100 reps I do at the beginning of my training in each the leg curl and the good mornings. So they have contributed a huge amount for me in the success I've had over the past year since my hamstring injury. Now, I'm not saying you should only train with high reps and high volume and never do low reps and low volume. I'm a big fan of the Westside conjugate system, and that they do both things for good reason. Everything has their own advantages. High reps and high volume, as I've been talking about in this video, it's good for building work capacity, building up weak points in muscles and so on, and being able to handle higher workload later on in their training, or in general higher intensities and higher exertions. On the other hand, low reps and low volume are good for building the ability to strain using maximal power. And I think we can all agree that in general, just lifting heavy weights is fun. So never stop doing that. But it should be done in combination with high volume and high workloads, high reps, because that way you're going to avoid your body feeling all cranked up like it would if all you did was sets of like 1 to 3. That alone would be unbeneficial, because you're never getting any blood flow. You're hearing me referring to blood flow in your muscles and so on a lot of times, but I highly believe that this is why a lot of people get injured when all they do is really specific powerlifting stuff and never changing up exercises that they do in the gym. They never create a sufficient amount of blood flow, but all they do is taxing their central nervous system. And over time, that leads to their joints and tendons feeling cranky, because you're not getting fluid into the most important places, which are your joints. So do your high volume stuff, do your high rep stuff, and maybe do it in the beginning of a training block for you to feel good later in the block and having the capacity to handle loads closer to a 1 rep max. But the way I would do it would be to combine it into a single program, like a conjugate style program, where you do all of the things. For example, do less reps in the beginning, in the first few sets, maybe do some singles in the bench press every minute on the minute, and then do a high rep set. For me, that has worked exceptionally well. I either have 2 days where I do either sets of 5 or singles, and then follow that up by a high rep set. And for me, that allows me to get the benefits of heavy training, where I get to strain maximally and learn to just apply as much force as I possibly can, which I believe is equally as an important skill as being able to tolerate the burn that you get from high reps and so on. But I also get the benefit of the high rep sets that I do, where I do 20, 30 reps or more than that even, and I feel my chest and my triceps burn, and I think that has been a huge contribution to how much my bench press has been improving recently, where I have done 25 reps with 90 kg, 30 with 100, and 20 with 100, and 30 with 80 kg, all unbroken, meaning that I never rest at the top. I just go up and down in one single set. I don't ever rest at the top of a rep and then have to stay there for a couple seconds to squeeze out more reps. I just go up and down constantly. And I know that a couple months ago I was not close to that at all. So simply adding that into my training has been monumental. And I also just believe that purely from a motivational standpoint, making things up helps you stay motivated. Sometimes it can get boring and feel like a long ride, and just trying out different things such as every minute on the minute stuff or different workout styles can really give you that energy boost that you need. And it's a good way to find out if there's more ways out there that might work better for you, especially if you're not doing well with what you're doing right now. But even if you are progressing, there might be a better way out there, a way where you're going to see even faster progress. So that is the two main reasons I would say you should mix things up.